Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Dyer and welcome to Colorado Inside Out on this Friday, November 22nd. Let me get right to introducing you to this week's Insider panel. We have Patty Calhoun, founder and editor of Westward; Krista Kafer, columnist with the Denver Post; Marianne Goodland, chief legislative reporter with Colorado Politics and the Denver and Colorado Springs Gazettes; and Laura Aldrete, a city building consultant and former planning director for the city and county of Denver. So Colorado has received more national attention this week for a couple of different reasons. Colorado is home to President-elect Trump's pick to lead the energy department. Meanwhile, Governor Polis is defending very publicly one of the other appointees. Patty, let's start with you. It's been a big week with all the appointments.
And really unusual appointments. When we first heard about the Robert F. Kennedy appointment, well, it was going that way anyway with Trump's appointments. But Polis's support of him, we thought he was hacked. We actually called the governor's office to find out if he was hacked, found out he wasn't. That left us kind of speechless. I was actually on a plane during all these crazy nominations, and I thought, who is going to happen next in the next 2 hours while I'm on this plane? Turned out it was Chris Wright. It was a Coloradan. And given all the other crazies, he is sounding like the voice of reason, which I would argue he is not. I'm drinking fracking fluid in his honor because he did do that. He is a fracker. He is a climate change denier. But he's an interesting fellow. He's smart. He did the North Face. He made fun of North Face when North Face wouldn't partner with another oil company to make jackets when he pointed out they're made of petroleum products. But he's going to be interesting. You know, we have a long history of Coloradans going into these departments. Governor Love was the very first energy czar, and he came from Colorado. He lasted 5 months, so we'll see how this goes.
5 months, okay. All right, Krista?
So I wouldn't go with the word unusual. I'd go with something that's slightly more colorful. We'll just go with clown show. So when the clown car pulls up, and there are some very serious people getting out of it, but then there's also, Eddie Munster. I mean, Matt Gaetz, obviously he's no longer in the running, but the crazy RFK, some other people that should never be nominees really to anything. And then we have some serious people, some people who have served in the Senate or people who have served as governors. And among the serious people, I would say it would be Chris Wright. He's been involved in the field of energy. If you've ever been to one of his sites, he does it's called a quiet fleet technology that his company, Liberty Energy, has pioneered. I think he's really the right guy for it. He knows energy, he's clever, he understands that we have to have all of the above, and that really our best savings comes from using natural gas instead of coal. And so, in all of the above, looking at nuclear, looking at hydro, looking at biomass, looking at wind and solar, I think it's all important, but I want somebody who's actually had his feet on the ground and done the kind of energy work that we need.
Marianne.
What I'm waiting for with regard to Chris Wright is to see what kind of questions he gets from the Senate for his confirmation and what his views are on the energy credits and energy investments that have come out of the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. The interesting thing about both of these bills is that with the IRA, of course, no Republicans voted for it, but that has had a lot of tax credits for electric vehicles, and a lot of that has gone into red states. So are Republicans going to be willing, and is the Trump administration and Wright willing to roll back or reduce some of those tax credits, which is one of the suggestions I've heard? With the bipartisan infrastructure law, there has been also a lot of investment in clean energy. And there's been some conversations about repealing that or rolling back some of that as well. But again, these are things that have created jobs in red states. And so there's a lot of discomfort, I think, with the Congress over what they're going to do about those two acts, which still have a 2-year shelf life left with them. They're supposed to go through 2026.
Well, as a Coloradan, I would love to be able to celebrate a nomination from Colorado, right? That's always good for our state. I had hoped we had learned a lesson, right, in the 80s, that recession that was so brutal when we were a singular economy, in particular of oil and gas. And then we woke up and said, hey, diversification is great for our economy, and we worked hard to diversify. And it feels like the nomination of Chris Wright is all about oil and gas. And as a business person, right, and I'm back in the private sector, you say yes to everything and you push everything because there's good to come out of that diversification. And so it feels like there's a personal, I don't know if it's a vendetta against the earth or climate or people who might be criticizing oil and gas, that he might ignore all the other alternatives instead of looking at the broad diversification, that opportunities that we have, and we should be going for them and continue down that path of exploration.
Okay. Will Operation Aurora really happen? What is it going to look like? President-elect Trump is expected to declare a national emergency and will use military assets to organize mass deportation. We've heard a lot of this talk again this week. We've heard from Mayor Johnston talking about it, being the neighboring city to Aurora. I'm going to start with you, Krista.
I wish they would stop calling it Operation Aurora. Aurora's
you love Aurora,
it's a great
I know.
city. I mean, there's great food, there's great communities. It's not so simple. Yes, there are people who have come over the border who should not be here. But a lot of the folks that come in through our southern border came through legally under the asylee program, or they're here under humanitarian parole. These are all legal immigrants. They have a right to be here until they have a hearing. And I'm glad that there are groups like the ACLU and others saying, we are here to back people who are here legally. And secondly, it's not so simple. You actually have to have an agreement with the country even to send people back. So this idea that we can simply just, run planes back and forth, it's just not that simple. I do hope there is a restoration of rule of law. I do hope they fortify the border. I do hope they work on the asylee program so that only those who are facing persecution can come through that avenue. Those are all things that have to be worked with Congress on, though. It's not something that you can just do unilaterally. So how this happens, I think we all need to have a level of high scrutiny.
Okay. Marianne.
To the question of whether it actually happens, I think the Trump administration would be in for a very, very big legal fight, because it's going to require that he utilize the National Guard. And Governor Polis, I think, would put his foot down pretty strongly, as would a lot of governors in other states that have large immigrant populations. That's number one. Number two, is it really smart? No. If you look at the impact on agriculture, which is something that I've been looking at, if you start deporting a lot of people who are not here legally perhaps, but working in places like meat packing and farms and ranches and all that kind of stuff, you're going to drive agriculture into a very, very big problem. And we're already hearing that from the ag community, is that these are their workers that they may be going after. And is that smart? Not if you like to eat.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll continue on this idea of the economy and how injurious this is going to be to the economy. And a significant portion of the construction industry workers are undocumented. To go back, I think the issue I wanted to focus on is the humanistic terror and the fear and the trauma that will be instituted throughout the Latino community, particularly. I don't mean just immigrant. I think you are brown, right? You are going to be targeted. My family had experienced the Mexican reparation from 1929 to 1936. We were here working, migrants. We were kicked out, and we have made our way back. And as most families, you have a blend across the border. And I think this idea that it is this hard line is just a fallacy. But, as a fair-skinned Latina, I don't have to worry, but I worry about the trauma that people of color will be experiencing from what he has planned.
And the uncertainty right now is scaring so many.
Absolutely.
Patty.
Well, that's definitely the case in Aurora, where migrants and the nonprofits who've been helping migrants don't know what's going to happen to them. Remember, we have Aurora City Council, which voted to investigate the nonprofits that had been helping the migrants. So that is underway, whether or not Trump carries through. I think Trump will. I mean, you've all been saying smart things about the economy. We haven't seen in his nominations that Trump is doing anything smart. He's not taking subtlety into account. He's not necessarily taking law into account. I was at the rally where he said, on day one, we will do Operation Aurora. He named it that. He said, we'll launch it. And even though he didn't necessarily keep his promises in 2016 about immigration, you can certainly see that given the mandate he feels he has, he may very well just come in, law be damned, National Guard, police be damned, but he'll figure out a way to do it.
Colorado's newly elected legislators met at the state capitol this week for an orientation. But Marianne, just as all the new people were coming in to learn the lay of the land, we're hearing that someone who has been a lawmaker for quite some time says, I want to leave. Another respected lawmaker is leaving.
Correct. That is State Senator Janet Buckner. Colorado Politics broke the story on Thursday that she is stepping down on January 9th, which happens to be the same day that Senator Chris Hansen is expected to step down from his seat. And then we also have Senator Kevin Van Winkle, who was elected to the Douglas County Board of County Commissioners, and he's expected to step down as well. So that's 3 vacancies before we've even gotten the 25 session underway. What I find really intriguing about this was a call on Thursday by Shad Mirab, the chair of the State Democratic Party, who basically said enough is enough. These vacancies are not being handled appropriately. It's too small a group of people who are allowed to make those decisions. And which is, to me, is really interesting because we had a bill in the legislature in the 24 session from Representative Bob Marshall about making changes to how vacancies operate. Kent Thiry actually had a ballot measure that he didn't move forward with, but he wanted to go to a special election when these vacancies take place. And the interesting thing in both the Hansen and Buckner situations, both of them were just reelected on November 5th. Senator Buckner ran unopposed. Senator Hansen had a libertarian opponent, no Republican, and won by 80+% of the vote. This is a system that is begging for reform.
To take a little bit of a different angle, CDOT came out this week with their Transportation Vision Plan 2035, which had 3 great goals, very lofty: reduce pollution, advance affordability, and I think increase quality of life. But it really misses the boat in terms of acknowledging that there is a real estate market that and government policy, local, state, or local policy that continues to encourage the cheapest housing at the edge of the city. So in order to afford housing, you're going to drive until you can afford your housing. And it is going to just encourage and continue the pattern that we've been in. So nice try for CDOT, but I feel like they've just missed the boat, and they're still not answering the hard questions of how do we really make substantial change in our metropolitan region.
And that announcement came with Governor Polis and some Democratic lawmakers from the state legislature, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Polis did mention, he did have a little aside about RTD, because let's remember, you can't take public transportation until it's working. So we're going to, and the legislature didn't go through with what they were talking about last year with trying to make some real changes to RTD. I think if they are doing their job, they will do that this year. But in the meantime, they have to, people who are running for the legislature should really be thinking a little bit about whether they want to keep that seat before they campaign. Clearly, Chris Hansen was talking about this job before then. No one enters into another campaign without thinking, maybe I really should retire now. You don't decide that 2 weeks after your election. So it's a shame that they're not taking seriously enough the people who are going to replace them and the people who maybe should be voted in by the residents of Colorado and not by a little committee.
Mm-hmm. Krista, your thoughts?
Well, 2 things. On the legislature, I want to give a shout out to Rose Puglisi because they gained some seats, and it's because she and others raised the money, ran smart candidates, did what was necessary to change and to bring new Republicans into the House. I think it's an interesting contrast because if you look at the Colorado GOP, which is actually supposed to do those things, raise up a bench of good people to run and raise money, they weren't doing any of it. As for Vision 2035, I don't think it's realistic. So I would say rather than invest so much into the bike, walk, transit, I think they need to build more roads, get rid of these HUV lanes so that we can move traffic faster. Most people, a lot of us gig workers anyway, are using our cars to get from point A to point B let's be realistic.
Right. Marianne, Krista mentioned how there were some Republican gains. What are you expecting, since you cover the legislature inside and out each session? What are you expecting? What's your vibe going into 2025?
I think housing is still going to it's going to continue to be a conversation point. I know that we're going to see another stab at construction defects reform. I'm already having conversations with folks about that. I don't think you're going to see a return to the acrimony that we saw in the 2023 session. I think people have learned their lessons, even though we do have a lot of new lawmakers that are coming in. I think we've got 20.
Over the next week, we're going to be gathering in our homes with our loved ones, but home to a lot of Coloradans is a stressor because of the cost and life circumstances. For some people, the idea of ever having a home seems unattainable. Denver Mayor Mike Johnston is announcing that for 2025, his administration will help 1,000 people who are currently homeless get them into permanent housing. Laura, this is the latest plan, and what are your thoughts on this? Is this the same plan, or just word changes? Because that word permanent housing stands out to me.
Yep, I'm not sure he knew. I would say I would guess that he did not know that there was a difference between transitional and permanent housing a year ago, right? He just came in and he said, I am taking people out of tent encampments and off the streets, and I am putting them in hotels. And there is a whole language of coming from the Housing and Urban Development federal government administration, as well as zoning code is a whole nother series of terminologies. And I think he's a lot wiser or knowledgeable a year into his administration. I think also he is retracting from the 2R failure, which I think was a comment from the citizens about performance overall. That's my personal opinion, but that he really tried to target towards nurses, firefighters, teachers, that middle income group that is the backbone of our city. And I am disappointed that he's suddenly jumping back to homelessness when I really want to focus on the backbone of our city and make sure that's solid for us.
Okay, all right, Patty.
Part of the problem with 2R, and I think the reason it went down in this city, is people, we've talked about it before, it's not an affordable city anymore, and it's not just you can't get housing, but even if you have housing, you're getting dinged for a lot of other things you didn't used to pay for, like trash, like residential parking. Your property taxes are up. And when 2R came up, it was so vague, it didn't seem to speak to the problems a lot of people are going through. Couple that with 2 years, a year and a half, of a focus on first homelessness, then migrants. Johnston had to deal with that. If you look on the streets of Denver, they look much better right now. But people really want to hear concrete ideas about how it's going to make their life better right now. So we will certainly see that coming up, I think, in the next year.
Okay.
Homeownership is expensive, and certainly more than what I bargained for. I've had my house in the burbs for almost 20 years, and only recently, with that hike in the assessment and then my local taxes, my mortgage is so much more, and even my the other kinds of things, the insurance coverage and all of that has gone up to a point where it's kind of tough. And so what I would urge some of these leaders to do, and not just Michael Johnston, but others, is they've got to look at these rates. They've got to figure out a way to bring, I realize it's good for the city. I live in a city that's really well managed. I love our parks. We've got great police and fire support. We've got all kinds of great things in this city, but I'm struggling to make ends meet, and I know that I'm not the only one. So the degree that they, new programs, maybe that helps, but I think on the other side of the ledger, which is the taxation part, city councils and mayors can really do some significant things to bring down that burden.
Okay, Marianne.
One of the things I thought that was interesting that came up this week was Denver approving ADUs. And this was something, of course, that was a very big discussion point in the legislature, has been for the last 2 years. That was something that the legislature did approve, making changes to allow for that. I'm really fascinated to see whether that actually takes hold in Denver. When you look at the cost of building an ADU, are people able to actually afford can they afford to do that? I'd be real surprised. And you look at things like tap fees, which are very, very expensive to get water, to get sewer to these new dwellings. This may be a path forward for the teachers, the firefighters, first responders, that kind of thing. But these aren't luxury homes. These are things that are intended for very small, for small families, for couples, for retirees. I'll be interested to see whether people in Denver really embrace the idea of having a second home on their properties.
Yeah, okay. Now let's talk about some of the highs and the lows from this week. We'll start with the lows so we can end on a good note. Patty, we'll start with you with the low.
I'm taking the low high. If you have ever been to Bishop Castle, an incredible example of just the magnificent obsessions. People come to Colorado or they're born in Colorado. They think they can do whatever they want. In this case, Jim Bishop from Pueblo built a castle in the San Luis Forest. It's an incredible place. He just passed away this week. And if you've never been there, go there. His son's trying to keep it going. And it's just a testament to towering ambition in this state.
Okay, all right, Krista.
You know, I want to say I really wish that Governor Polis had not shown so much enthusiasm for RFK. Vaccine deniers, it can cost lives. Read about the story in Samoa where JFK got involved, vaccine rates dropped, a measles outbreak claimed the lives of 83 people. We have no business praising people like RFK.
Okay.
The clown car of cabinet appointments for the Trump administration, which of course no longer includes Matt Gaetz, thank goodness, but still includes some very, very questionable individuals. I was reading yesterday with regard to Tulsi Gabbard, the former Democratic congressperson from Hawaii, that if she winds up becoming the director of national intelligence, our allies are going to stop sharing intelligence with us. And I think that that's a genuine concern in the intelligence community. And then you also have RFK Jr. and some very dangerous ideas that he likes to promote. I realized that Governor Polis said, well, he's, you know, that's just the way he talks. And it was like, this is how you know who a person is.
Laura.
Ellen DeGeneres and Portia announced this week that they are leaving America out of disgust for Trump. And two things that I think are unfortunate about that. One, it smacks of privilege and entitlement. Not everybody, just because you don't like something or are afraid, you can leave, get up and buy a chalet somewhere else. And two, it's as an American, your obligation to democracy in your country is to have those hard conversations with people you don't agree with and to try to hear them and try to hear the middle of America that the whole Democratic Party completely missed in this last election. And it's just disappointing that she's celebrating that she's leaving her own country and not waving her flag and saying, LGBTQ continue to have their rights here and we're going to continue to have these conversations.
Okay. Let's talk about something good, Patty.
I talked about the streets of Denver. Get out and see them this weekend. You have the downtown skating rink is opening. You have the Christkindl Market, which is open in Civic Center. You have the new drone show that's coming in. We'll soon have the lighting of Union Station, the lighting of City and County building. It's all free. Get out and see that Denver looks good.
And this weekend, the weather's going to be warm to go out and do some of the fun stuff, too. All right, the Castle Rock Star, I think, is getting lit as well this weekend.
And what, Cherry Creek, too?
Everything.
Everybody's getting lit this weekend.
Everyone's getting lit. Are you getting lit, Krista?
Kudos to the U.S. Senate. The adults there said to soon-to-be President Donald Trump, some of these nominees are not going to fly, and we're going to do our part to make sure they don't end up doing, being somewhere where they can do some damage.
Okay, Marianne.
I can't help it. My Indiana Hoosiers football team are 10-0 and hopefully going to take on Ohio State this weekend. Hopefully we get a big win on that. I know everybody thinks I'm crazy when I say it, but go Hoosiers.
Go Hoosiers. They're having a great year. Are you kidding me? Yeah, Laura.
So inspired by Patty's editorial this week, I decided to create a bingo card of all the potential nominations. And one, I've already lost out on this corner here of Matt Gaetz, but something so troubling. I just had to make some fun with it. And so if anybody else wants to create a bingo card and have a little fun out of a potentially sad moment.
This is your therapy.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay, and you had an injured hand, but you can still
Yeah.
use scissors to do all
Glue
that.
sticks, scissors, and markers, just like going back to grade school. It's
Pretty
great.
impressive.
It
Okay,
was
Laura.
good therapy.
Okay, all right. My high, and I know everyone's been talking about this all week, the heartfelt show of support and birthday love extended to CU superfan Peggy Coppin over this week. What a whirlwind it has been for Miss Peggy. She turned 100 on Tuesday. And I think there is nothing better than witnessing how students 80 years younger than her love her, respect her, and go out of their way to show how proud they are that she's a matriarch of the CU family. It's incredible to watch that video of the 50,000 people in Folsom Field singing happy birthday to her. And she says that she did cry because she misses her twin sister, the late Betty. But she was also so grateful for the communities surrounding her, and she just feels so happy. And I saw in a quote, she said, someone was asking her about all the hoopla and the national attention she's getting. She said, to get all this attention for just having a good time is unbelievable. So thank you, Peggy, for sharing your joy and having a good time in front of all of us. Thank you for Colorado for the exceptional and genuine show of appreciation for a very special woman. Thanks to our women, our insiders. It just kind of worked out this way with the scheduling. We appreciate you all being here this week. Thank you all for watching or listening to our podcast. And make sure that you heat up your leftovers this time next week. We'll see you here on PBS 12 next Friday. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family and friends.
PBS 12 believes in the power of original, local programming. Help us bring more shows, like the one you just watched, by donating at pbs12.org/program support today.